What if the story behind an album isn't the music at all, but an emotional landscape that shaped it? Welcome to I Have Questions with Michael Ruland. That's where we're going to begin in part 2 of my conversation with Ezra Vancil. In this chapter, we dig into the heart of Morning and Midnight, his new album. It's not just a double album itself, but it's a book of poetry and journals that Ezra calls the map of how he made it. Ezra talks about waking up some mornings convinced he couldn't keep going, feeling too old, too tired, too overwhelmed, and how those moments became poems and entries and reflections that actually helped him push forward. We're going to explain how creativity becomes a lifeline and how documenting the process reveals the truth behind those songs. This part of the conversation is intimate and honest and full of the kind of insight you really only get from someone who's lived every inch of the story that they're telling. So, are you ready? I hope so, because
I have questions.
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 I'm plenty of the food that doesn't have questions, which I do.
All right, let's continue our conversation with Ezra. And to me, hearing you say that about the book is, that to me is super interesting, right? To open up your mind to help me understand the process is something that I really would like to see.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I wanted, is just to see what it takes.
Yeah.
The background. And it's not just like it's not like a recipe of how I made things, but it was how I felt. Like I would wake up some days, because it's hard to make a double album. I made it in a year and keep everything else going. And so I would wake up some days, like all of us do, and go, what am I doing? I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. I'm too old. And then that would become a poem or a journal entry of how I kind of encourage myself. Okay, we can do this. And so it is kind of a map of how I do it, how I got up and kept making something, and getting it done.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I'm gonna go a little off my script, which for you is new, but for the 3 people who listen to me, they'll be like, well, this is a normal thing. So
4 people. I'll listen to.
Yes. I don't know why. And this is, I guess, what makes music and art so amazing is that it reaches different people for different reasons, right? But you have a song, and I think it came from maybe, I don't remember, 2020, a few years ago. It's called Big Old House. Does that song ring with you?
Yeah.
This actually is for me. Nobody else, if they don't know, but what is that song about? Because I know what it means to me, and I'm like, oh my God, I love the beat and the way your voice and the whole tone of it is amazing to me.
Well, I will say I like what it means to you more than what it means to me, because I always like people to find their own meaning inside of a song. But I'm pulling it back into my mind now. One thing that it inspired that song is that, so I grew up in old houses. My dad loved old houses. He would get them and he would fix them up, and they're always construction site in our kitchen or something. And then I also got a love of that. So when I wrote that in 2020, I was living in Oak Cliff in about 100-year-old house, working on it all the time. And it was just the most beautiful time. My daughter had just started singing with me, so she's on that song. I think she's 12 or 13 years old.
What?
Yes.
Her voice is,
yes.
People, when you listen to the song, her voice is not 12 or 13.
No.
Sorry, I interrupted, but go.
Yeah, she is way beyond her years in her voice. But it was such a beautiful time in our little old house that's fallen apart, making music with my daughter. I love clutter and my wife loves old things, and we just gather all that stuff around us. And, you just have these times in life that song, when I listen to it, it gives that feeling of just this family in an old house with things they love. And, and it goes, if you listen to the lyrics, it goes through all the different things that we do there. My wife, she's a jeweler and a silversmith. And so she's over there working on her silver and her crafts, and I'm working on the roof. And,
Yep.
it's just a day-to-day life in an old house.
You know what? I'll just tell you that what you just said is exactly why I obviously have glommed onto it. I grew up in a small farm in North Dakota. The house had originally been built in the late 1800s, but had been added to, like all good farmhouses should be.
Right.
Like every 20 years, somebody would literally just paste another square onto the side of it, right?
Uh-huh.
And my wife and I live in an older house now out here in Washington, and I'm a horrible construction guy, so it is in an utter state of disrepair all the time. And so that's exactly, I heard that song and I'm like, yeah, it's about the feeling of my family and the home I have, and not the wood structure, which
Yes.
encapsulates it. So, all right,
Yeah.
I diverged a little, but
Yeah. Well, let me add one thing, because there's a little twist on the end of that song, because it's called Big Old House, but at the end it says something, and I can't pull the lyric to mind about it being in this little house, because it was a little house, but it felt big because of all that was going on in my home.
I caught that. I did catch that part. Which I mean, like, again, our house is 1,200 square feet, which includes the garage, I think, quite frankly. And so it's this really tiny house, but it's a mansion in our minds and our hearts. And in that song, clearly that's what it meant to me. So, all right. Thank you for indulging me, Ezra.
Sure.
I appreciate that. So you brought it up, and it is definitely something I was hoping to touch on. So this is called a great segue, I think, in the biz. So you've said you've been performing with your daughter since, I think, she was a teenager, in a sense, right? What has performing with your daughter taught you?
Oh my goodness. I tell you, boy, it has taught me so much. That girl has put me in line. So we started this, she was home, we were homeschooling her during this period, during the COVID years.
Yeah.
And she wanted to play music and be in a band. And I said, okay, well, let's do it as a homeschool project. And so that's how it all started.
That's awesome.
And I said, if we're going to do it, though, we're going to do it like I do it. And we're going to be at rehearsal on time, or we're going to rehearse and record. And so immediately we butt heads, just like bam. And she was hurt, and I was frustrated. And so we kind of had a sidebar and sat down and said, how are we going to do this without hurting each other so much? Because every time I criticize something, it just tears her apart, So we decided the first thing was, I gave her some rules to make sure, because she's also writing songs. I gave her some rules to make her comfortable, which was she had final say. Because she was younger than me, we actually had a whole band, and she was younger than all of us, we weren't going to let the adults run her over. So anything that we were doing, she could call it off. There was no voting. It was her say, just to make her feel comfortable with all of these adults. And if she didn't feel comfortable singing something. And the other thing is, we decided that we are no longer father and daughter in this band. We're just bandmates. And if she wants dad, she can call me out and go, I want to talk to dad. But when we work together, we keep in this mind state, we're just bandmates. She treats me just like I treat my drummer, and my drummer treats me. And then later, we can just have our relationship. So we kind of created this imaginary world. And what it's done for me, though, is that I've always had, I'm a perfectionist. I work really hard at my music. And I've had many, many bands, and I've heard rumors that I'm not a nice guy to work with. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I think I'm a real nice guy. Well, she showed me that I wasn't a nice guy and that I would pick on people and I would be passive aggressive and all these things. And it has helped me so much because she, just the kind of girl she is, she's able to call that out on me if I'm being passive aggressive or just aggressive. And then I realized I don't realize I'm doing that. I don't realize I'm frustrating people. And I don't want to do that. I just want to get, what we're doing in harmony. And so she's literally changed how I work with people. I think I was so much in my head about what I wanted that now when I work with a band, I'm trying to openly talk about, what do you think about this? And what do you about, I want to hear everybody and not just run them over. And she's helped me do that. And I think I'm a lot better now with working with groups of people.
That's awesome. Well, you literally just completely stole and sideswiped like the next two questions.
Okay.
One of which literally says, it ends with, what was it like to recognize that in a mirror? I won't read you the first part of the question because you just answered all of that. So way to go. Now I have to come up with a different question. No, that's awesome. I think, I see that so often, right? With, my own kids who I'm hard on, and they're in their 30s. Oh my gosh. One's
I've got one of those too.
Yeah. One's actually closer to 40. I'm like, oh my gosh, she just had her birthday. But, it's funny watching them do things and I'm like, oh, that's me. And then I'm like, did I teach them that? Shoot. Right. So,
yeah, it's a mirror. Yes.
Yeah, it is a mirror.
I have a son that's almost 30. And, I also, as I get older, I'm sure you recognize so many things that frustrated me about my dad. They just come out and I'll like recognize them and go, oh my gosh, I am my dad in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so life kind of teaches you these things.
Yeah. We exactly. Right. Yeah, I am my dad too, as much as I used to fight it. Right now I'm just like, yep, done fighting it. So, so I used to be a math teacher, a high school math teacher. And then I was an assistant principal and blah, blah, blah. But I think you've been a teacher. You've taught production and guitar and that. So I'm going to ask from a teacher perspective or whatever, I guess. But what has stood out to you about students who actually made their dreams real? So like, I have hundreds of students who wanted to be whatever they deemed. I have an old student who's a jazz singer in Chicago now, and just on and on and on. But what has stood out to you about those kids that then went on to do their thing?
Yeah, I have one of my students I see on Instagram. He follows me and I follow him. And he, one of the things I taught was film production. And now he's on major films. He shoots stuff on Instagram. I watch him on major film sets. And first of all, it's very rewarding to see that. But also I remember him, and there were several kids that really wanted, so they said, to be in this field. But this kid was willing to do everything and anything. And so I think the first one was, the big part was he was open to the ideas of learning and listening, where some other students, and not that, I'm sure they had good paths in front of them, but they liked the idea of learning this, but in action, they didn't. And they didn't volunteer. And I would see him just volunteer for anything. We did on-site projects with film shoots. He would do any job. But the one that wanted to be an actor was like, I don't want to run the camera. I don't want to do that. I have
Yeah.
nothing. He'd run the camera. He'd act. He'd do anything because he had this willingness to learn, that was, I think, why he's in the industry now.
Yeah. That's, it's so true. So in a sense, there's learning something, but then there's acting on it, right?
Yes.
Actually doing the stuff needed to do.
That's really what it came down to. Is there was I remember at the end of school, he was about to graduate and he said, I really want to do this. I love this. What do I need to do? He wants to make films. And I said, well, you're going to have to start going to film festivals. And I told the whole class this. And I said, but you really got to do it because you've got to network and you've got to be in that crowd. And he went the next week. There was a film festival in Dallas and he shot me a text. Is like, look where I am. It was the action behind it,
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think that's the ones who are willing to do anything action wise are the ones who are going to keep pushing and doing it. Exactly right. So so I usually do this later, but this is a perfect time for it. As someone who's a teacher and a father and an artist and he's got some years under his belt, what's a piece of advice you would give a new teacher then stepping into a classroom for the first time?
I feel like I might have told you something, but I don't remember what it was. Oh, I think, well, I'm just going off the top of my head because I can't think of I have some good advice in that area and I can't pull it up together. But I do remember just knowing, because mainly I did guitar teaching when I was young and then I did some media teaching, is knowing that not all the kids there are going to get what you're saying or want it. They're just there because they have to be.
Yep.
But don't let that steal it from the kids that are there to learn, because I remember going in and half the class was goofing off and, a lot of them didn't want to be there. And I would get frustrated and I would turn all my attention to trying to get them interested, where more so I should just teach what I have with all that I got for the kids that are listening. And I don't ever really get to know who they were, who I was teaching guitar to that was really taking it in. I know now that some were and some weren't taking it. They just had to go there because their parents wanted them there,
Yeah.
But I think that's the biggest advice. Don't let that stop you from giving your all to the student, because there are a few students there or a lot you don't know that are listening. And looking back, I think I picked that up later. I didn't pick it up in the beginning because I would work so hard on the ones that didn't want it at all. And instead of just giving it fully to the whole class, all that I got. And if they want something and if they're willing to work for it, stepping up and giving them the tools they need.
Yeah. That's great advice. I think it's super important that everybody gives advice for new teachers at any level teaching anything, because it is a thankless job and it is brutally hard. And, oftentimes like you mentioned, you don't get your reward until years and years later sometimes. And sometimes you may never even know the reward, right? And that's going to wrap up part 2 of my conversation with Ezra Vancil. I sure hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. So today we explored the emotional backbone of morning and midnight, the poetry, the journaling, the doubt, the encouragement, and the quiet determination that carried Ezra through the making of a double album. We talked about old houses and family and collaboration and the lessons learned from performing alongside his daughter, lessons that reshaped how he leads, listens, and creates. I find that so awesome. I learn from my kids every single day. I often wish I could go back and redo the dad thing. But even with me being schmucky at it, they turned out amazing and they teach me new stuff every day. So talking to Ezra about his journey and that same concept was awesome. Next week in part 3, we're going to shift into teaching and mentorship and the wisdom Ezra has gathered from years of guiding students in music, film, and creativity. So I can hardly wait for you to join me next week. You aren't going to want to miss it. So if you're enjoying this conversation, please like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment. It's free to you. But most importantly, it helps more people find the podcast, and it keeps our little community of curious humans growing. As always, thanks for listening. I'll see you next week right here where curiosity leads and questions follow. P.S. By the way, P.S. I want to take us to Dallas today before we wrap up. It's a place where fried food and neon light and carnival rides somehow turn into a lesson about curiosity. And in Dallas, that is called the Texas State Fair. Every single year, millions wander through its gates, drawn by big Texas booming welcome. He's a gigantic statue. And the smell of things you didn't know could be deep fried. But beneath the fun, the fair has always been a showcase of invention, new farming tools, new technologies, new ideas about how people live and work. And tucked inside that history is a moment that actually changed Texas forever. In 1936, during the Texas Centennial Exposition held on those very same fairgrounds, the world saw the debut of Fair Park's Art Deco architecture. There's a mouthful. It's a collection of buildings so striking and they were so ambitious for the time that it became the largest Art Deco complex in the United States. It wasn't just a celebration, it became a statement. Texas wanted the world to see its creativity, its confidence, and its future. So, that exposition brought millions of visitors, introduced new industries, and reshaped Dallas's identity. It proved that curiosity, that willingness to explore, to experiment, to build something bold could actually transform a place and a people. And here's the part that kind of gets my curiosity. Learning doesn't always happen in classrooms. Sometimes it takes going between a livestock barn and a Ferris wheel. So as you step away from this episode today, carry this thought. What ordinary place in your life might be hiding something extraordinary? If you slow down just enough to notice it. Peace, love, R.